Hello. As promised, here is my answer video to all your questions. First off, let me just say I am very happy to announce we are only 11 backers away from my goal. I'm very grateful to the new folks who joined, and if you haven't signed up, please consider helping push me over that line. In regards to the new folks who did sign up, I will, from here on out, name all patrons in subsequent videos. At least until maybe I get so many backers that it becomes somewhat infeasible. Or human language or mouthparts evolve to the point I can no longer pronounce or recognize human names. So, thanks to DeepStateNine, Rylan Browner, Rendar, Francisco Esqueda, Louis Correa, Domestica 1664, Cake, Andrew Ziggas, Speedking Oz, Mike Murdock, Dopamine Cloud, Excelsis Caeli, Kuropiko, MiracleMajutsu, Julian Johnson, Treatea, and JXP for recently signing up. As well, thanks to the continuing support of Ninebreaker, I Feed My Atlas Green Chicken, Zachary Tebbal, KDZ, AJ Brown, Gen Zino, Carl Hager, Not Very Subtle, arcticArduino, Ethan Banks, OsakanOne, Metal Dragon, Mathieu TITARRO, and Alpharius Omegon for their continued backing. With all that out of the way, let's get to your great questions. Well, mostly great questions. I got a bunch, so I'll try to answer basically all if possible. As well, last time I forgot to include the names of the artists, which I included as examples in that video. The art was done by the very talented Stick, Sandman, and Sir Tidehunter II. It's pretty good stuff, so sorry about that. Also, if I mispronounced anybody's names, don't take it too personally. I'm just gonna try to guess my best attempt. Ilquanza 1706 asked, 1. Considering the pseudo-references, would you make a video essay on the Silver Case? It's tempting, it's very tempting. I only finished the Silver Case a few years back, and it was one of the works I made sure to finish before making any visual novels of my own, mainly Nibios. So it was to help me learn how creatively I could use that format. I love pseudo stuff, but also mainly I think first I have another pseudo thing I need to do a video on. Number 2. Would love to hear what your drawing process is on how you render the texture of mecha designs. My favorite conventional approach is just pencil into watercolors, or inks, then watercolors. But of course, make sure your inks are dry, or they will bleed very badly. Number 3. A video on Tarkovsky's Stalker. Tarkovsky's stuff is amazing. I would love to do something on it, but it also has to compete with the other 1,000 video ideas rattling around in my brain at the moment. Emperor of Kortov asks, when do we sail for the fringe of the Black Iron Fortress? When do we seize the throne of Yaldabaoth and let loose the light of knowledge to free the vacant minds of the machine? Not soon enough. The DERP 2? The D3RP2? One of these asks, 1. What is your favorite Patlabor episode? That's a tough one for me to pick because there's a lot of them. I'd say the coup d'etat episodes from the TV series are neat for how they redo the movie's plot with, some differences. From the OVAs, the Godzilla one is pretty funny. I like those ones a lot. 2. What is the most obscure, in English-speaking world, anime that you've seen? I have no idea. The way that new lost content YouTubers dig up and peddle every kind of niche thing these days makes it virtually impossible for me to even guess. Number 3. Do you have a favorite aircraft? That's a very hard one to choose. Maybe the Machin M39. It did win a Schneider Trophy, and it looks pretty great. Number 4. What are your biggest fears and hopes for Ace Combat 8? My biggest fears are probably just that they don't reuse some of the best series concepts, like the Allied attack feature from 6, but they do reuse bad or weak elements. Very forced narrative, stiff level design. Basically, if you want to know what my hopes are, it's just the inverse of all that. Number 5. What is a sci-fi concept that you feel is underrated or underused? Probably like honest to goodness, really, really well done lasers. Seriously, actual, like, pretty lasers. Not Star Wars blasters, that's cheating. Those are just very slow tracer rounds. I mean, like, honest to goodness, eviscerating, spark-shooting, meltingly hot lasers. Especially if the melted thing explodes afterwards. That's like a really satisfying visual thing to see. Ethan B1 2007 asks, 1. Are there any interesting facts you found while researching for a video that didn't make it in for whatever reason? There's literally too many to count. Tons of stuff is left on the cutting room floor just because it's not really relevant enough. Very recently, a fun example was while making the Big O video, I was very tempted to mention that the very famous Mamoru Oshii was supposedly in training to be a priest, but then he read the Gnostic Gospels, and that's actually what broke him out of that career and eventually led to him kind of joining anime, but then reusing a lot of those ideas. It really, like I said, it wasn't really relevant to that video, so I did not include it, but very neat. Number 2, has making YouTube videos changed how you view/consume media? Yes, absolutely. A lot of the magic in some stuff has very much gone away, because I know more of how the sausage gets made than ever really before. But at the same time, I also have way more respect for how hard it is to get art made, and even art that I hate, I try to consider the context and conditions which made it. I find those kind of very moronic fans who, they yell at media as if like God just drops art fully formed out of the sky, and they kind of yell at it or praise it, and I don't know, it's very simple, it's kind of laughable to me, honestly. 3. Besides Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, and Koyana Squatsi, which you have used clips of in your videos, what are your other favorite non-mecha movies? That's another really hard one. I've seen hundreds upon hundreds of movies. I tend to do pretty regular movie watching on my own. If I had to suggest another favorite that I would highly recommend, it would be Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain. It's a very phenomenal, drug-fueled, spiritual, symbolic journey. It's both incredibly complex and also incredibly simple in terms of the story it's telling. And despite how many people I knew really loved that whole Jodorowsky's Dune documentary, when I actually kind of asked them, very few seem to have actually seen his stuff, including this movie, which is disappointing. Number 4, do you remember love? That's like being hungry, right? Like for a fish in space or something? Lakunan asks, 1. Do you prefer the Sazabi or the Nightingale? Probably Sazabi for sure. Nightingale to me never felt like it reflected Char's very high mobility style of combat with its, very bulky design very well. I also think it's a design which, it looks kind of weird, like melted, and unlike other weird mobile armors that might make sense if they're like underwater or in space, I think it always looks like it's been outside on like a hot day and it's just really tired. 2. Do you prefer the new or the high new? Both the new and high new are great. I think I may lean more towards the classic new, if only because they creatively dealt with Tomino's give it a cape demand very interestingly. The high new does more of a kind of wing thing, which, many later Gundams would end up doing, but it's still very sleek. It's a nice design. 3. If you are successful on YouTube, or in contract work, do you plan to move out of Canada? That's, it's very tempting in some ways and not in others. Other countries are obviously very neat. It would be very cool to live someplace else, very different. But Canada's standard of living is pretty solid, and generally speaking, economically, politically, it's pretty stable, which is pretty good. Maybe moving away from Toronto's ridiculous fucking housing bullshit, and I don't know. Also, our province is kind of run by a smooth brain at the moment. Death Alchemist asks, 1. Which non-anime Gundam projects would you recommend? Any you would like to see animated? I don't know. Side material stuff is it's very questionable of quality. It's always just kind of that thing that there's more of if you just want more Gundam, so I'm very kind of hesitant. The anime is clearly the focus. The anime usually has some of the best story writing and that kind of thing. In terms of adaptations, though, I'd say maybe just Crossbone, if not for anything more than just the sheer irony of the joke of kind of just dabbing on all the people who said that it would never be adapted ever. I think that'd be kind of funny. 2. This is a big one, but favorite mecha. Feel free to divide this into various subcategories if it was too hard to answer, i.e. favorite Gundam, favorite super robot, favorite non-Gundam from a Gundam, etc. Now this is kind of like asking Willy Wonka what his favorite candy is, so I would say that the list is too long to go into depth and would take up probably like 40 minutes of just one video you know? So what I will say is, instead, as a small example, I do like a good big-ass cool jacket or cape. Those are very nice. D-Snuff from Diebuster and Vulcan from Gun X Sword are great, as is, of course, to me, the very nostalgic Escaflowne designs. Those are all very, very cool. 3. What got you into anime and or mecha as your main focus? What inspired you to start YouTube and influenced you to do funny drawings as your main editing video graphics? Honestly, for that one, it was very simple. I already knew how to draw. Motion graphics are really nice. High production values are very nice, but they're also incredibly time-consuming. Most videos, I think, that kind of pull off that stuff very consistently, they either have templates that they just reuse the crap out of, which I don't like to do, because I want to make sure each video feels like it's tailored to whatever the subject I'm talking about. So, with those kind of very, you know, tight balances of just like, I don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk about stuff in depth, naturally funny little doodles are just kind of like perfect. I can like whip them out. They're just emotional enough to like make you laugh, but they don't take too long to make, and I can still get a little creative with them. As for starting YouTube, it was something I didn't want to do for a long time. People told me like for 4 to 6 years before starting any video production, hey, you are like, you've got a great voice or you make interesting points, you should do YouTube. And I was always like, no, I don't want to do that. Because I was like, you know, do I really is it really that interesting what I have to say, blah, blah, blah. And it was really only after someone I knew in uni and one of my best friends kind of kept pushing me for years that I was like, oh, okay, fine. I'll give it a shot. 4. Any mecha you like that don't originate in Japan? The Iron Giant is amazing. It's a great movie. It's got a really good compositing of very early CG and 2D design. It might be Brad Bird's strongest film. Really, really good. Love that whole thing. 5. What other things do you enjoy besides anime and military sci-fi? Besides mecha and military SF stuff, I tend to like a lot of stuff that relates to human history, anthropology, archaeology in general, biology, architecture, obviously, cooking, all those kinds of things. In terms of like media more specifically, I'm probably just as broad. I like adventure movies, I like action movies, I like mystery movies, I like a few romance movies, like period pieces. So really, it's same kind of problem. It just kind of goes and goes and goes. 6. Joke question: death by chocolate or death by hugs? There's a great documentary called Monty Python and the Meaning of Life, which gives a very good answer that I support to this. Spinu5393 asks, 1. What do you think of recent Gundam projects in the last 10 to 15 years? You don't seem to hate, like, or even acknowledge them. I will get to them eventually. I have a lot to say, quite a bit to say actually. The issue with Gundam is that, you know, it's kind of like the moon. It's so big that you can just never see the far side of it. And so it's like, yeah, I want to deal with the earlier Gundams first, but as a consequence of that, by accident, yeah, I might give the impression, oh, I don't really care about anything after like 1997 or whatever, but it's like, no, I do. It's just, it's so big that, you know, I kind of want to finish what I have in front of me and then move on, or, you know, get to that when it's, I got things to say, don't worry. I do like, hate, and feel things about many of them. 2. Your Armored Core video sort of answered this, but will you make a video on machines and architecture? I always have more to say on both. I love giant structures, I love machines, giant machines that can build them, and giant machines building giant structures. It's all cool. I could honestly talk about it at any time. 3. What do you think of small mecha, power armor, or infantry so decked out that they get mistaken for machines? It's all pretty dope. I read Starship Troopers fairly young, and as such, I am always sucker for a good, chunky-ass, galactic future, you know, soldier man, you know, in some kind of cool armor suit. It's all big thumbs up. Also, in regards to your comment below your questions, don't worry about, you know, not being able to back me as a student. You are basically entering a very tough time when balancing life responsibilities can be very difficult, so don't worry, I understand. But when you get that $1 million job, send me a check for all the, you know, and I will bill you for all the years that you could have been backing me. And my accountants have already been notified, so don't worry. You don't have to support me now, but when you do, I will collect interest. Nintara3746 asks, 1. What are some of your favorite and least favorite mechanical designs? I know you probably wanted specific examples, but it's like I could list so many that I'm just gonna say I basically like any mechanical design that is stylish enough to express a creator's preferences very specifically. Even stuff I don't like personally, I'll usually still respect if it's so like distinct that I'm like, oh, this is like that guy or that person, you know, this is their style. Like recently, I think the brain-powered mechanical designer passed away, and that was very saddening because that was, one, both a very unique style. I'm forgetting their name, so I feel a little bad, but one, very unique style, and two, I think that was one of the few female mechanical designers that I knew worked in the industry. So, like, that was, like, that sucked. Because, you know, that person was, one, interesting, and two, you know, there's not a lot of ladies out there as a career drawing robots, so that was pretty bad. 2. Favorite video game console. Now, I never owned a PS2, but my friend had a PS2, and the PS2 seems to have just, like, an amazing catalog. In terms of what I actually honestly grew up on, it was, you know, it was the Xbox 360, so I gotta say, you know, PlayStation has no games. 3. What music do you listen to? Not gonna surprise too many people. Like everything else, I listen to huge quantities of music. It's hard for me to even narrow it down to an example. There's been certain years where for like a few months straight, I will knock out a new album almost a day. You know, like hundreds of albums. So, yeah. In terms of quality that I will always recommend and say are personal favorites of mine, any good prog rock, I love it. So your classic stuff, even if it's a little simple, like Pink Floyd, Genesis, yes, Rush, Van der Graaf Generator, Jethro Tull, you know, so on and so on and so forth, all that stuff. Very, very good. 4. If you could introduce massive but specific changes on the world, like snapping your fingers and suddenly all money that any millionaire has goes poof, or clapping your hand and suddenly it's always room temperature everywhere, with no way to easily reverse them, would you trust your understanding of the world enough to do it? Yes. Oh boy, yes. There are some things that what I would do, you know, this isn't necessarily a threat, but like I would do them and I wouldn't feel very bad, and I think they would improve the world objectively, and I can say that. 5. Favorite mecha from a non-mecha work. The Avatar amp suit was, for a Western design thing, pretty great. Very cool design. I think the way they did it as a practical effect, also very good. Literally the only downside is that it has to exist in the James Cameron's Avatar universe, but oh well. 6. Would you rather eat a shard of glass or pee a shard of glass? Well, I mean, if you eat it, you have to, like, get it out at some point, you know what I mean? But you also didn't specify a sharp shard of glass. So you could take an eroded shard, which would become rounded and smooth from, like, you know, water passing over it, or like in a kind of a tumbler or something, and then just kind of lumpily pass it through your body. This is why if you make genie wishes, you should always be specific. Vin7490 asks, mecha-related question that you can said for Muvlove Mechanical. I think this guy had a stroke when he was typing this. Someone might want to check in on him. Ian Barbosa 6201 asks, G-Armor or the Core Booster? G-Armor is way funnier. It's way funnier, which makes the violence that is, you know, it is subjected to and enact even funnier. But the Core Booster is way more sane of a design. Somebody, I think, even made like a pseudo Core Booster in Kerbal Space Program a few years back, and it was like, you know, it was a brick, but it was like, it's generally the right shape for like a lifting body. It's kind of this delta wing thing, and it all kind of worked. But by that metric as well, not as funny, you know, not as funny to think about a rocket tank mecha in space World War II killing people, you know, it's just a normal plane. Oh, okay, more sane, less funny. Now, a serious question, at least what I consider serious. What do you think of Witch from Mercury and its mixed, to say the least, reception in the West? I have quite a bit to say on G-Witch, as I do for most of the Gundams. I would say it unfortunately did fall victim to the culture war kind of bullshit, which is kind of stupid. I've also heard that it, like, deposed Supernatural on Tumblr as one of, like, the biggest fandoms, which is, like, I was never really big on Tumblr, but that's very impressive if you know Tumblr culture. You know, that's like flipping, I don't know, California to vote like Republican or something. It's insane. I would say in general, though, that like Mike Stacklasa and Rich Evans of Red Letter Media, I mostly care about what the story does and how well it does it, rather than surface level shit. And in that regards, I would just say G-Witch probably could have used more episodes. But yeah, that's in a nutshell, I guess. 2. When I saw Kobayashi's video, I was very sad that Kondo, Makoto's best friend in the G Club, didn't have your opinions on his art style nor any mention of him in the video. I feel his art is very similar, yet distinct from Makoto's. I would like you to say something about them. By the way, what do you think about the design that Makoto reuses in his original works? For example, like the O Neo Geo and the Boundock being the soldiers in Dragon's Heaven. Kondo will, I'm repeating myself quite a bit now, get a video at some point. I do like Kondo. Like I kind of answered that question previously, he's got a specific style. It's very weird. It's very distinct. Yeah, no, I really just need to make more on mechanical designers videos, but then it's just competing with all these other videos that I want to make. So that's, hopefully, I don't mean any disrespect to Kondo or his style. Me not mentioning him was not trying to downplay him or anything. It was just, I only have so much time, and it was already the Kobayashi video, so, you know. Subarashi05815 asks, 1. How did you get into architecture, and who are your inspirations? I want to say mostly it was just playing video games as a kid, watching movies, that kind of thing, and you start to notice, like I started to notice how worlds were constructed and how important that was for storytelling, and even like chronologically how much you could identify like when a thing was made based on what the architecture was. And it gets even better with science fiction because science fiction is speculative, so it's like a crystallized, you know, future of the past is what a lot of architecture and design can be. Real life has limitations, real life has material limitations, and obviously construction costs and stuff like that. And so fictional media in general can kind of defy that, and in defying it, you kind of take notice of it, and then you can reverse apply that to the real world and be like, oh, hey, like, that's a thing I recognize. I don't know if I have any inspirations for architecture. I have a long list of architects that I like. But I would say the main, maybe one other thing is that I did get a gigantic, like 600-page massive book on architecture from one of my godparents as a kid. And it's huge. It's a huge friggin' book. You could kill someone by dropping this. It would snap their neck if it landed on their head. And it had so many examples. It's like a catalog almost. And that was just like, oh my god, there's like a whole world out there, you know, the guys doing this thing. So, 2. Would you be interested in starting a series about media outside of mecha, maybe something Western in the spirit of your on mecha vids and such, maybe even to something directly or tangentially related to on media, which that was 4 years ago. Yes, as you folks should be noticing, my issue isn't that I don't have much to say, but rather that I have too much to say about too many things. Mecha, in that sense, isn't necessarily special. I tend to get pretty analytical with all media I consume. The next video after this one will be kind of about on media, but also stories, but I don't want to give too much away. It will not be directly, mostly not mecha related, but there's a lot of overlap. You'll see. 3. Apart from doing the Ace Combat reviews and anime mecha analysis that isn't shit, what were your other reasons for pursuing this channel? Making tons of money, impressing beautiful women with big boobies, killing God, riding a motorcycle, and winning the X Games like my hero Tony Hawk did on a skateboard. 4. Have you ever thought about continuing on books? I really enjoyed that one. Yes, once again, that's another thing that I would like to do more of, but I've also tended to reincorporate what I'm reading way more directly into other vids. As with the Armored Core Hyper Objects one, I'm mostly just working whatever weird philosophy or whatever religious text or whatever the heck I'm reading. I'll try to just like work that into a bigger video. Yeah, I could probably do a video on it alone, but there's other people out there, you know, Religion for Breakfast is great, Esoterica, those YouTube channels, that's all they do, and they're phenomenal. So I don't feel like I need to do more direct stuff. I'd rather work it into mecha. 5. When is Votoms? Eventually. At some point. Bank 1062 asks, only questions I got is, what got you into mecha, and what is your all-time favorite mecha property? As mentioned, it was very much the science fiction pipeline. Nerds tend to like similar stuff, even if, you know, it's from another culture. If it's equally nerdy, you kind of mesh with it, so I was kind of primed at a young age to love science fiction. From there, my insatiable hunger just kind of led me to it. Sound of asks, 1. In your Utena Eva architecture video, you mentioned the Centre Pompidou in Paris. Did you know that the hospital from Ikuhara's Penguin Drum is based off that same building? No, I did not know that, but it does not surprise me in the least. Ikuhara loves that crazy kind of postmodern / you know, high-tech architecture. I'm talking about the movements here, not just terms, like the very specific movements, like that one bank building in England. You know, just that like use of pipes and repeating kind of structural elements. Yeah, I could totally see him being like, and obviously the Francophile crap as well, of course. I need to rewatch Penguin Drum at some point. 2. Your reading of the work's architecture was spot on and succinct. Do you have any other thoughts on the apocalypse of adolescence films' multiplicity of graphic and architectural style, such as the use of bold, limited colors or the focus on clean, flat, geometric shapes? I could say a lot about this, but in the interest of time, as this video is already going to be like probably like half an hour or more, I'll just say Ikuhara's ability to transfer theatrical style and stage design to anime is astoundingly sharp and killer. In stage production, physical limits place very heavy restrictions on stuff like, you know, perspective, where the audience can sit and view, the angle into the world, the weight of moving these stage pieces around, that kind of thing. So Ikuhara's using those kinds of limitations and kind of knowingly, even when he breaks them, playing with them. And so that's why it's fantastically very creative and inventive. Like the whole school in adolescence, like with all the shifting pieces. Like if you just try to interpret it as a structure, it's a thing with bits moving around. But if you look at it as a stage, it's like, okay, this is the multiple panels of, like, you know, the backgrounds shifting. So it's clearly kind of inspired by that. 3. What other unique syntheses of architecture and anime fiction do you appreciate? Neoclassicism in sci-fi and mecha, or sparse amounts of futuristic gothic structures in Ghost in the Shell Innocence? That's also a pretty hardcore question. I think all the examples would take way too long, so I would just broadly say I love whenever a story uses its locations and architecture very intentionally to show something like a theme or reinforce its core ideas. You know, there's lots of stories with boring architecture, there's lots of stories with neat places that are just kind of used for their neatness, which is not bad, but when you kind of use both towards like a succinct thing, it's kind of the best, right? It's like using costume towards like, oh, this is who the character is. So like an example that comes to mind of all this is maybe Gankutsuo's very crazy friggin' composited CG backgrounds, because, you know, you're remixing the Count of Monte Cristo into this like futuristic sci-fi thing. So yeah, remix like the layout, remix like the geography and the architecture of Paris into this insane landscape. It just kind of fits really well. Shuroi Kami asks, I don't really have any questions for your Q&A, but if you wanted to dedicate a bit of time for ripping into Seed, I'd like that. Okay, so you want to know what makes me really laugh about modern Gundam Seed discourse? It is people on Twitter who, through either contrarianism, nostalgia, or just both, after that recent Seed movie, like I think it was Seed Freedom movie, suddenly it's like, oh, Seed and Destiny need to be reconsidered, and Seed's actually pretty good, guys. It's like the vibe it gives me is the exact same kind of stupid younger Star Wars fans, you know, who do that thing where they're like, oh, see, the prequels aren't so bad, everyone laughs, you know, they're so iconic, they're so memorable, and they're kind of forgetting the fact that, like, yeah, it's iconic because it's so bad, you know, we're laughing at the movie, not with it, you know. So the Seed movie, it wasn't that it was like good and suddenly maybe Seed's good. To me, it was more like it was so friggin' whacked out of its mind that you kind of like, oh, nothing, you know, this doesn't matter anymore. This is all like nonsense. It's entertaining, but that doesn't change the fact that the original Seed does the same things seriously and kind of sucks for it. So Omega, the stupid Marine, asks, What is your opinion on the YouTuber Jason Wolf and his practical mecha design series? I cannot say I'm very familiar with them at all. 5 minutes, watching like 5 minutes of one of their videos. I think they use one of those AI voiceovers though, and it's one of the ones that constantly almost sounds intonation-wise as if it's almost out of breath, and I don't enjoy that. 2. What's your opinion on various mech designs on art sites like DeviantArt, i.e. Tankhead, Grandian, Zoots, Guntrigger, etc.? There's a very wide range there because they are websites that anyone can upload to. So you have, you know, some interesting stuff or some quality stuff, and you also have a lot of very rough or unpolished designs. It really is just a shotgun blast of whoever uses the site, really. 3. Is there any fellow mecha YouTubers that you don't talk down to or call stupid for not understanding these complex philosophies you're known for presenting? I would also like to hear your opinion on Transformers. It's a franchise I grew up with and hold near and dear to my heart. Now this is going to sound a little weird, but I actually don't watch many other mecha AniTubers. Especially like mecha specific stuff. And this is largely because I kind of have a core group of friends to talk to, you know, about like mecha stuff, like if a new show comes out. So I don't really need like a person that I'm not friends with, like their opinion. And it's not even like all my friends agree. I've argued for hours with some of my friends over like a new show or a classic show. Oh, it's bad. No, it's good. That kind of thing. It's more just like, I don't need that parasocial level of like, this guy's my friend. It's like, well, okay, I don't need that. And so if that's not it, then it's the content. And that kind of leads me to the second thing, which is, I think Mercury Falcon, some of his videos covering like the 70s stuff are really good because it's really a period that gets ignored, and it's like, oh, that's that toy shit. You know, there's nothing really interesting there. And it's like, yeah, it was a very consumerist kind of time, and the narratives weren't exactly super complex, but there's a lot of history there to go into in regards to a lot of stuff. So those are good, but then I watched his Double Zeta Gundam video, and it was like, I think dramatically lower in terms of effort that I put in versus he put in on the subject. And he mostly said, I watched it and I didn't mind it that much. So it's like, he's very inconsistent. There's some videos where he puts in a lot of effort and I love them, and then there's others where I'm just like, I don't really care. It's like some guy's opinion. I could have a random opinion and say, I don't know, Grandizer is the best super robot show from the 70s or whatever. Pyramid Inu also has some neat videos. They kind of follow the more wishy-washy video essay format, which is good for covering kind of a network of related topics, kind of relating to like a central theme. But in doing so, they never really focus a ton. I think his Dugram one was really the most focused, and even there, I don't know. Like, the problem with both of them and other guys, like the ones that I don't think are just like dumb, like Kakarot, whatever, blah 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 blah, is that because I cover such a similar topic, even when they're doing a great job, I'm always going to be a little annoyed because I'm always going to be like, well, I would have done that a little differently. It's like, you know, it's like two chefs, and the chefs make like a similar dish, and it's like, oh, you put too much garlic in, or you didn't put enough paprika in. You know, it's like with magnets, right? Like opposes like. It's the same thing. It's like I'm too similar, so I'm not saying like these guys are shit, they're the worst or whatever, but it's like I'm always just a little annoyed because I'm like, oh, I would have done that a little differently. And then in regards to Transformers shows, Beast Wars. I grew up with Beast Wars. It's the best Transformers show. Proudly Canadian, made in Canada. God bless. User PV61M IK6T asks, what is your favorite sci-fi story and why it moves you? That is incredibly difficult because I've read so many, and there's ones that absolutely made me tear up, and then I just read so many more that I kind of forget, and then I have to kind of mentally go through. If I have to pick one out off the top of my head, I'd say Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy is fantastic. It inspired me in a lot of different ways. Really good book series. Yeah, like good, not just science fiction, but like anthropological fiction. Great stuff. Only thing that really ever captured kind of the culture of my homeland of Mars perfectly, you know, wonderfully. Stick the Second 5085 asks, 1. You have military submarine that is your own and it has nukes. Which country would you exterminate? I would say none, because that's destabilizing to the current human world, which I relied on to give me imported Japanese rice crackers, so I would not do that. 2. Would you fuck Bridge from Guilty Gear or Link to Breath of the Wild? I think you mean Bridget and Link, and I would say no, because they're both blonde, and you know how blonde people are. 3. If Zeon was real, would they win against Earth? Maybe. They could bombard it from space and establish space superiority, but that would not directly result in the occupation of the Earth, and the Earth is so developed and built up. Listen, I'm just going to do a video on this at some point. 4. If there really was a military mecha, what would be the first war crime they would commit? Probably stepping on someone. Stepping on someone they were not supposed to is what they would do. 5. Would you throw rocks at people for food? No. 6. Which among the Zappy family could you fight and kill with your bare hands? Garma or probably Dagwin. He looks kind of old and lumpy and brittle. 7. For a human to generate lift by flapping their arms, how many and how fast would they have to flap those arms? Both arms, for a 70 kilogram human, it is 17,500 flaps per second with the given surface area. 8. If I gave you a little version of me as a gift, what would you do with it? I would put that in a large vase on a temple, like a pedestal in a temple with traps, and I would leave it there for an archaeologist to go into. PPL6660 asks, 1. What are your thoughts on the last Exile series? I enjoyed the first series a lot. I loved Gonzo's weird phase of just doing neat original stuff, and Last Exile falls squarely into that. By the way, BC Piezophile, which is an underwater mech sim, very Steel Battalion-y, is being worked on right now. It's on Steam, and it is also set in a massive spinning hourglass space colony, but with way too much water instead of Last Exile where they didn't have enough water. You should check it out. 2. In character design in manga and anime, or in general, what do you personally look out for? I like distinct style, it's always very good, combined with less is more approaches. I do not like over-designed machines or characters. I like keep things simple, succinct, don't do no detail, but, you know, balance the amount of detail, don't go overkill. I think with CG, mecha have gotten way over the top, and with shit like gacha games where, you know, you do, 5 illustrations of a character. Character designs can go crazy. They get way overcomplicated. One of the things very early on that I loved about, for example, Chainsaw Man, is that every one of the Demon Hunter guys, they just wore suits. They just wore black suits. And it was kind of great. It's also the reason that I like many of the giant robo designs, like the Big Fire organization guys, because they're just guys in suits. It's great. It's so simple, you know? It's stylish. 3. Do you build any Gunpla or other models? I have around 30-ish Gunpla. I also have an unbuilt Night Raven kit from Ace Combat 3. Nexo Minoza 616 asks, I'm excited for the Eureka 7 one. Also, and ever heard of Fafnir? If not, you should check it out, and I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts on it are. Yes, I know of Fafnir. I tried to watch it once, but I also bounced off of it. That was maybe 10 years ago, so I am not sure how I would feel now. I'd have to go back and watch it, actually. Kuropiko asks, which Gundam has the best wings, and why is it the Victory 2? Victory 2 has great wings. Really, really cool wings. I love the way they blend into the body. Very sleek, very good. But I grew up when I was very, very young. Some of my earliest memories, I happen to have lived through a very specific period where big, cool wings in shows with mecha in them that were supposed to be aimed at women were marketed at Western audiences, including boys. I think you might know what I'm talking about, and as such, I can only say that the Endless Waltz Wing Gundam actually has the best wings. And it's super cheesy, and I know they like, real feathers come out of them, but, you know, like I said, very young age, just big impression. Yellow Cheese asks, which non-Gundam Tomino show do you like the most and why? That's very, very tough. I would say Ideon is one of my all-time favorites. It's incredibly friggin' brutal, and I love it, but it's also really dark. And as such, if I actually had to choose one that I would go back and watch just for fun, I'd probably say Overman Kinganger. It's really, really fun. The opening is great. The mecha design is super, super unique, and the actual story is really lighthearted. It's funny, people mention Blue Gale Zabungle as this is the best lighthearted Tomino show, but I think it's Gainer. I think Gainer is just really overlooked, which is unfortunate. Yeah. Edokdict asks, do you have a favorite mobile suit and also a favorite non-UC Gundam anime? The Zaku is my favorite because he is big and green and strong. I wish that I had a Zaku to pilot around my neighborhood in real life. I own many, many Zakus. Most of my Gunpla are Zakus. Of the non-UC Gundam shows, it is probably a very close race between Season 1 of 00, G Gundam, and maybe Wing if I get real good and drunk. If you count Turn A, it's probably Turn A. If you count Turn A. Depending on how you base your understanding of the correct century and so on, probably that one. Tishmon8164 asks, 1. How the fuck do you win all your arguments? That's easy. You just gotta type I win and then a smiley face. That's how you do it. It's very simple. USS Zilla NCC 2000 asks, what are your thoughts on the current state of mecha anime as of 2024? Well, do I have to say that it's not dead? That hyperbolic bullshit should be pretty obviously wrong. As if it even needs being said. Giga can go jump off a cliff, and yeah, so I think there's some, there's been some good stuff recently. Bravern came out recently. I'm still looking forward to that next Hathaway movie. I mean, it's not too surprising, right? Like, it's still not super crazy. It's not a super dominant period in terms of stuff coming out, but there's clearly still shows coming out, and some of them are pretty good. Movies as well. Okay, well, hopefully that's a pretty solid list of answers to your questions. Once again, if you haven't backed me on Patreon, please consider it. We are 11 guys off of my goal, or ladies, or whoever, someone away, so we're very close. And the next big video is going to be on Atlantis.